We are going to talk about clear and concise writing. This is one of the standards that the ACT is constantly testing you on in the English section. It's important to know that the ACT prefers shorter sentences when possible. So that doesn't mean that you're going to omit everything whenever you see that option, but they're about making sure your writing is not just clear, which is sort of self-explanatory, but we'll look at some examples, but also concise. So concise means short, direct, straight to the point. So the English section is not about, long-winded, beautiful, stream of consciousness prose. It is about straightforward, thoughtful writing that is direct and clear to the reader. So for instance, let's look at this example. It's usually hard to determine who first uttered out loud a given word. We're just going to pause right here and look at that underlined portion. So it's usually hard to determine who first uttered out loud. This is an example of one of the two things the ACT does not like. So we talked about how they preferred shorter sentences. The ACT does not like wordiness or redundancy. So this would be an example of wordiness, using too many words to explain what you mean. So given the choice, you could get rid of that and just use a word like spoke. It's usually hard to determine who first spoke a given word. So that would be the correct answer there on that ACT question. And almost as hard to know who first wrote it down originally. So on this ACT question, it might give you options like A, you can omit. B, first wrote it down to begin with. And, C, other options that sound something similar to originally. But this is an example of redundancy. You're being redundant if you are repeating yourself unnecessarily, which we are here because we already have first. Almost as hard to know who first wrote it down. Originally does absolutely nothing for us in this sentence because it is just repeating first. So we would get rid of that, choose A for omit, and that would be correct. So let's look at this next section. On her next trip, she headed straight to her hometown where she already knew the people and the people knew her. In Eatonville, her hometown, Hurston went to places where she knew oral tradition would be thriving. So this here would be an example of redundancy. So again, our correct choice in this situation would be to omit that right there and keep in Eatonville, comma, Hurston went to places where she knew. And so I think this is really important because a lot of times on the English section, we can work really quickly. But in this question right here, it's important that we have already paid attention to and looked back at the previous paragraph. This is redundant because on her next trip, she headed straight to her hometown where she already knew the people and the people knew her, in Eatonville, her hometown. So that redundancy is, a full clause apart and in a different paragraph. So it's important that we make sure that we are looking at the full context when we are trying to use clear and concise writing.